Hello everyone and welcome to my channel Y&R Trends. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. The tension in the Newman mansion was palpable, thick like a storm cloud ready to burst, every corner humming with unspoken dread as Nikki stood frozen, her eyes wide with disbelief and horror, heart pounding in her chest as Jack stormed into the room like a whirlwind, the sheer force of his presence demanding attention. His jaw clenched with a dangerous mixture of anger and desperation, the very air vibrating with the energy of impending conflict. And then in a moment so sudden it stole Nikki's breath. Diane, standing too close, said something that Jack misinterpreted, or perhaps in his fury chose to interpret as a threat, and without warning Jack shoved her violently across the polished floor, the harsh sound of impact echoing through the mansion like a gunshot, and Diane fell with a startled cry, her hands scraping against the unforgiving surface as pain radiated through her arms, her head jolting back in shock. But before anyone could even blink, Nikki, rushing forward, instinctively tripped over a chair, her heel catching on the leg as she stumbled into Jack's broad frame, the movement chaotic and uncontrolled, and then it happened, an explosive electric moment that seemed to stretch time itself. A hand, sharp and unrelenting, connected with Nikki's face, the force of the slap sending her staggering backward, a piercing scream tearing from her throat, reverberating through the grand hall and rattling the fragile tranquility that had existed just moments before, her hair flying wildly as she clutched her cheek, eyes brimming with tears that blurred the line between shock and anger, the pain burning hot and immediate, leaving her momentarily breathless. And Jack, his chest heaving, eyes wide with instant regret mixed with residual fury, turned on Diane, the intensity of his protective instincts for Nikki igniting a wildfire of rage, the muscles in his arms tensing as he stepped forward, each movement sharp and decisive, and with a shove so forceful it nearly knocked Diane off balance again. He made it clear in the most visceral way possible that Nikki was untouchable, inviolable in that moment, and Diane, caught between disbelief, guilt and indignation, stumbled back, her own voice rising in shocked protest. But the words caught in her throat as she realized the depths of Jack's fury, the sheer power and protectiveness emanating from him like a shield around Nikki, who now steadied herself, still trembling from the sting of the slap, the room around them spinning slightly as adrenaline coursed through her veins, the familiar weight of fear, anger, and love mingling in a cocktail that left her dizzy but resolute, and in that charged silence every glance, every twitch of muscle, every shallow breath carried meaning. The air heavy with unspoken truths, betrayal and devotion, the kind of moment that defined the very essence of the Newman legacy. Nikki, clutching her face and wincing from the sharp sting, stared at Diane, her eyes blazing with hurt and incredulity, while Jack's protective stance remained unyielding, a living barricade between Nikki and any further harm, his mind racing with fragmented thoughts of the danger Nikki had narrowly escaped, the betrayal that lingered in Diane's eyes, the shocking intensity of the slap still resonating in his ears, and yet, even amidst the chaos, Nikki's gaze softened just slightly at the sight of Jack's unwavering determination, recognizing the depth of his care, the extremity of his willingness to shield her from harm, the world narrowing to this singular, explosive moment of conflict and protection, every heartbeat echoing with tension, fear, and the complex intertwining of love, loyalty and rage as Diane, still reeling from Jack's shove and Nikki's scream, scrambled to regain composure, realizing that whatever attempt at confrontation she had imagined was now completely shattered, her intentions lost in the whirlwind of emotions, the room now a battlefield of raw feelings, the walls seeming to close in as the aftermath of the slap and shove hung in the air like a heavy fog. Nikki finally finding her footing and trembling but unbroken, Jack's eyes locked on Diane, unflinching, a warning and a promise, the protective fire burning bright as the two women and Jack stood in the tense silence that followed, each processing the shock, pain, and emotional turbulence that had just erupted, every fiber of their beings buzzing with the energy of that instant, the echo of the slap lingering like a phantom touch, an indelible mark on the day, the memory, and their hearts. And as Nikki finally drew a shaky breath, placing a hand on Jack's arm as if to steady herself and acknowledge his presence, Diane's expression flickered between guilt, fear, and anger, the room crackling with unresolved tension, each character trapped in a web of emotions, the sheer intensity of the moment leaving no room for rational thought, only instinct, raw emotion, and the harsh reality of their intertwined lives, where love, loyalty, betrayal, and protection collided violently. leaving scars visible and invisible, physical and emotional. And as the seconds stretched, elongated by the weight of what had just transpired, Nikki, still trembling from the slap and the shock, finally whispered something inaudible, a mixture of hurt, surprise and reluctant gratitude, while Jack's stance softened ever so slightly, still protective but now tempered by concern, and Diane, caught in the eye of this emotional storm, realized that the consequences of this encounter would ripple far beyond this room, altering relationships, loyalties, and alliances in ways none of them could have anticipated. The mansion itself seeming to hold its breath as the echoes of pain, anger, and protection lingered, a dramatic testament to the intensity, unpredictability, and explosive emotion that defined the lives of those bound to the Newman name. The memory of the slap and the shove etched indelibly into the psyche of each witness, a shocking reminder of how quickly love and conflict could collide. And as Nikki finally regained a measure of composure, her hand still pressed to her face, she knew that this moment, this raw, unfiltered, emotionally charged clash would haunt, define, and shape the relationships in her life forever. The room still charged with tension, hearts racing, breaths shallow, and the unspoken question hanging heavy. What would happen next in this maelstrom of love, rage, and loyalty, where every action, every reaction, and every emotion could set off a chain reaction as explosive and dramatic as the shocking slap itself? The tension in the Newman mansion did not dissipate with Nikki's regained footing. If anything, it intensified, a living, breathing entity that wrapped itself around every piece of polished furniture, every gilded frame, and every expensive rug, infiltrating the spaces between breaths and heartbeats, searing into the consciousness of everyone present as Nikki, her hand still trembling against her reddened cheek, took a hesitant step toward the center of the room, her legs unsteady as though the very floor beneath her might give way under the weight of what had just occurred, the sting of the slap still radiating like a sharp, cruel echo through her mind, her thoughts a whirlpool of disbelief, hurt, and a strange, reluctant acknowledgement of Jack's protective ferocity, while Jack, standing like a sentinel, arms slightly raised as if to shield her from any further harm, his chest rising and falling with the forceful rhythm of adrenaline, scanned Diane's face, his eyes sharp, hawk-like, piercing into her very soul as if trying to read every unspoken intention, every hidden motive, and every ounce of guilt or malice that might have been present in her. And Diane, caught in the intensity of his gaze, felt a wave of panic surge through her, her usual composure evaporating in the face of such unyielding anger, her fingers trembling slightly as she raised them to her chest in a feeble, almost childlike gesture of defense, realizing too late that words, explanations, or rationalizations would be powerless against the raw, protective force of Jack's emotions, and the mansion itself seemed to shudder in response, the chandelier swaying gently as if even the walls recognized the seismic energy that had erupted, shadows flickering across the high ceilings like dark, judgmental witnesses to the unfolding drama. The once elegant living room transformed into a battlefield of raw emotion where every glance carried the weight of accusation, and every breath seemed to tremble with suppressed fury. Nikki's eyes, wide and glistening, darted between Jack and Diane, the roller coaster of her feelings almost too much to bear. Fear, confusion, relief, and an inexplicable surge of appreciation for Jack's courage mingling into a potent, dizzying cocktail that left her reeling, and she struggled to find her voice, the words lodged in her throat, a fragile dam holding back an ocean of emotions that threatened to spill forth in uncontrollable torrents, while Jack's gaze softened ever so slightly, a subtle flicker betraying the concern that burned beneath the layers of fury, though his posture remained unyielding, a living shield around Nikki, his mind racing through every possible scenario, every past moment when he had failed to protect those he loved, fueling the intensity of his vigilance, and Diane, meanwhile, felt herself shrinking in the metaphorical crosshairs of Jack's anger, every inch of her body betraying the shame and embarrassment she tried vainly to suppress, her lips parting as though to speak, only to close again, her thoughts jumbled, scattered, haunted by the memory of the shove and the realization that the consequences of this explosive encounter would reverberate far beyond this single moment, touching alliances, friendships, and loyalties, weaving into the intricate tapestry of their lives in ways that none of them could yet comprehend. Nikki, regaining a modicum of control, forced herself to breathe deeply, the sharp intake of air filling her lungs with a mix of pain, fury, and relief, her pulse pounding in rhythm with the unrelenting tension of the room, and in that breath, she sensed the enormity of what had just occurred. A slap, a scream, a shove, a protective act so fierce that it bordered on violence, and yet, underneath it all, a layer of care and devotion that only Jack could convey. A ferocity born not of anger alone, but of love, and in that moment, Nikki realized just how thin the line was between chaos and protection, how quickly the veneer of civility could shatter, leaving only raw, naked emotion in its wake, and her mind involuntarily flickered back to every time Jack had been there for her, every act of quiet devotion or explosive intervention, and she understood, almost viscerally, that this moment, shocking and painful though it was also a testament to the depth of his loyalty, and yet the sting on her cheek refused to fade, a constant, burning reminder of the fragility of her own composure and the unpredictable nature of those around her, the way a single misstep, a single word, or a single misinterpreted gesture could ignite a conflagration of emotion, leaving hearts raw and unguarded, and Diane, her chest heaving, her hands curling into fists in a mix of guilt, frustration, and helplessness, realized that she had inadvertently become a catalyst in this emotional maelstrom, and, though part of her wanted to retreat, to shrink away and disappear into some forgotten corner of the mansion, another more defiant part of her felt a stubborn need to stay, to face the consequences however terrifying, knowing full well that this encounter would change the dynamic among all three forever. Jack's gaze did not waver, though a flicker of internal conflict crossed his face, his eyes narrowing not in anger toward Nikki, never Nikki, but in the precise targeting of Diane, the person who had, however unintentionally, threatened the one he loved, and he took a measured step forward, the subtle sound of polished leather against the floor announcing his advance like a drumbeat in the charged silence, his muscles coiled, ready to act at the slightest sign of renewed aggression, and Nikki instinctively reached for him, her fingers brushing his arm in a brief, grounding contact, a silent acknowledgement of both fear and trust, while Diane, noticing the gesture, felt an uncomfortable pang, a recognition that no words could undo the bond that had just been so powerfully reaffirmed, and the room seemed to shrink, the atmosphere thickening with unspoken emotions, the chandelier light flickering across the scene in a way that accentuated every expression, every bead of sweat, every tremor of muscle, amplifying the intensity of the confrontation, turning the grand, opulent mansion into a stage for human emotion in its rawest, most unfiltered form. As Nikki steadied herself, her pulse still racing, her vision slightly blurred from the sting, she began to speak, her voice trembling but gaining strength with each word, a mixture of accusation, pain, and tentative gratitude spilling forth in a torrent of emotion that made every syllable resonate like a bell of warning and declaration, while Jack, still unwavering in his protective stance, listened intently. His own emotions a complex tangle of residual anger, relief, and deep-seated devotion, calculating every nuance, every implication of Nikki's words, every flicker of expression on Diane's face, and Diane, finally finding her voice, attempted to explain, to apologize, but her words were halting, clumsy, insufficient, as the weight of Jack's gaze and Nikki's hurt seemed to crush her under the invisible, unrelenting pressure of their combined emotional gravity, and with every second, the tension mounted further, spiraling outward, touching the edges of the room, vibrating against walls, windows, and furniture, leaving nothing untouched by the storm of raw human feeling that had erupted, a storm that promised consequences far beyond the physical manifestations of slaps and shoves, reaching into the heart, mind, and soul of everyone involved, the emotional ripples of this singular, shocking moment destined to shape decisions, relationships, and loyalties for weeks, months, perhaps even years to come. The room seemed to pulse with the echoes of Nikki's scream, the sting of the slap still vivid in her mind, a red-hot reminder that no one could predict how quickly moments could spiral out of control, and as she pressed her hand against her cheek, her fingers trembling slightly, Jack's protective presence loomed over her like a living shield, a bastion of strength that both reassured and terrified her because of the sheer intensity of the emotion radiating from him, a tempest of love, loyalty, and righteous fury that seemed capable of sweeping everything before it, and Diane, caught in the eye of this storm, felt her own chest tighten, her heart thudding like a frantic drumbeat as guilt, fear, and anger collided in a chaotic storm within her, each emotion amplifying the other, leaving her both frozen and restless, unable to predict whether Jack would act again in the same explosive manner, or whether Nikki would finally find her voice to address the hurt that burned so sharply across her face and spirit. And Nikki, despite the lingering pain, felt a strange, conflicted mixture of emotions, a cocktail of fear, gratitude, shock, and the undeniable recognition of Jack's unwavering devotion that left her both comforted and unsettled. Her thoughts racing through a labyrinth of past incidents, near misses, whispered promises, and explosive confrontations, all converging into the single, monumental reality of this moment, where a slap, a shove, and the fierce protection of someone she loved so deeply had transformed the very atmosphere of the mansion, the chandeliers above trembling faintly as if in sympathy, the polished floors reflecting the tension like a mirror of fractured emotions, the walls seeming to lean in closer as if to witness every twitch of muscle, every intake of breath, every flicker of emotion that crossed their faces, and Jack, his jaw tight, his stance unwavering, his chest rising and falling with a rhythm dictated by both anger and relief, stepped slightly closer to Nikki, creating an unspoken barrier between her and Diane, a silent declaration that no further harm would come to her under his watch, while Diane, her hands curling into uneasy fists, tried desperately to form coherent words, to offer explanations, apologies, or even pleas, but the weight of Jack's gaze and the intensity of the moment rendered her speechless, leaving only a trembling vulnerability that made her feel both small and culpable, as if the physical space between them had become a chasm filled with electric tension, impossible to bridge with mere words, and Nikki, finally able to draw a shaky breath, felt the sting in her cheek flare again as though her body were refusing to forget the slap, her pulse racing, heart hammering, and yet, beneath the pain, a thread of awareness grew, an acknowledgement that Jack's actions, though shocking, had been born from love, from the desperate need to protect her from harm, and that this volatile mix of violence and devotion was inseparable from the complex tapestry of their intertwined lives, a tapestry woven from years of loyalty, betrayal, heartbreak, reconciliation, and unspoken truths that made moments like this both devastating and revealing in ways that mere words could never capture, while Diane, her gaze flitting from Nikki to Jack and back again, realized the enormity of what had just transpired, that this single, explosive encounter would linger in memory, shaping perceptions, influencing decisions, and casting a long shadow over future interactions, the mansion itself seeming to hum in response to the emotional energy that saturated every corner. The air heavy with tension, each exhale and intake of breath magnified in significance, as though the walls themselves were bearing witness to the unrelenting drama of human emotion unfolding within their gilded confines. Nikki's knees wobbled slightly, her composure faltering as the pain from the slap radiated outward, a dull ache mingling with the sharper sting, and yet she forced herself to remain upright, her hand resting lightly on Jack's arm, a silent acknowledgement of both fear and trust, a grounding tether in the midst of chaos, while Jack's eyes, still blazing with residual fury, flicked toward Diane, narrowing as though to silently dictate the parameters of acceptable behavior, the unspoken message. Clear. Never, ever harm Nikki again, intentionally or otherwise, and Diane, fully aware of the weight behind his gaze, felt a chill run through her, the gravity of the moment pressing down on her like an unseen hand, constricting and heavy, leaving her breathless, heart racing, mind spinning through endless possibilities of what this encounter meant, both in the immediate sense and for the future of her relationships with the Newmans, with Jack, with Nikki, and even with herself, as she recognized that her role in this explosive drama was now permanently etched into the narrative of their lives, a single misstep reverberating outward like a pebble thrown into a pond, creating ripples that could not be contained, and Nikki, feeling the heat of adrenaline mingling with lingering pain, allowed herself a brief glance at Diane, eyes blazing not only with hurt but with the recognition that the boundaries between love, loyalty, and danger were far thinner than she had ever imagined, that one moment, one action, one mistake could shatter the fragile equilibrium of trust and intimacy, leaving scars visible and invisible, permanent and fleeting, and Jack, sensing the shift in her attention, subtly relaxed his stance, though his presence remained formidable, protective, a living wall, while Diane, attempting to regain composure, took a hesitant step back, her mind awash with thoughts of culpability, fear, and an urgent, desperate desire to explain, to repair, to somehow navigate the treacherous emotional terrain she had so recklessly entered, realizing too late that explanations alone could never undo the raw reality of the slap, the scream, the shove, the protective surge, and the shockwaves that now radiated through each of them, altering the dynamic, redrawing the invisible lines of loyalty, trust, and fear. Every second stretched interminably, each breath heavy with meaning, the room charged with electricity, Nikki's heartbeat echoing against the walls, Jack's protective energy radiating outward in waves, Diane's guilt and panic a palpable presence in the charged air, and the mansion itself seemed to pulse along with the emotional turbulence, the chandeliers catching the light and reflecting it in fractured patterns across their faces, shadows dancing like specters of conflict and desire, of pain and protection, and Nikki, trembling slightly but determined to assert herself, finally spoke, her words a mixture of accusation, confusion, and tentative acknowledgement of Jack's protective instincts, and Jack listened intently, every fiber of his being coiled in tension, mind racing through past failures, present threats, and the relentless need to shield Nikki from harm, while Diane, noticing the subtle shift in Nikki's tone, realized that she had become not just a participant in this drama, but a symbol of the danger that Jack would not tolerate, and the room, already saturated with tension, seemed to constrict further, every sound amplified, the scrape of a chair, the distant ticking of a clock, the almost imperceptible intake of breath. Each one a punctuation mark in the unfolding epic of raw human emotion, each one a reminder of the fragile, volatile balance between love, fury, and betrayal.